So you thinking about tracing your family roots back to Ireland? That's awesome. But before you dive in, you really need to get the basics down. In this guide, we're going to cover the absolute essentials, the core knowledge you need to get started, and hey, maybe even ace a quiz or two on the fundamentals.
So just how big is the Irish diaspora? Well, check this out. 80 million. That's the estimated number of people around the globe who claim Irish ancestry. You're part of a massive global family.
Just imagine that for a second. It's like this gigantic, global family tree, with branches stretching across continents and roots going back centuries, all connecting back to one small green island.
So, the big question is, are you ready to find your branch on that tree? Well, if you are, you've come to the right place. Let's get started.
Okay, first things first, we need to build your starting toolkit. Seriously, before you even think about typing a name into a search box, you absolutely need to know these 4 key pieces of information about your ancestor. They're game changers.
Okay, here they are. Their surname, their religion, their townland of origin, and some approximate dates for things like birth, marriage, or death. Now, why are these so critical? Well, it's because Irish records are organized differently. It's not just about a name. They're filed away by location and, you guessed it, by religion. Think of these 4 things as the keys you need to unlock the right set of records.
And let's zoom in on that location piece, because this is where so many people get stuck. We're not talking about the county, not at first anyway. The single most important piece of geographic info is the townland. What's a townland? Well, it's the smallest, most local address you can have. There are over 60,000 of them. It's way more important than the county, and honestly, trying to find your family without it is, well, it's a real needle in a haystack situation.
All right, now for a bit of a reality check. Researching Irish ancestors isn't always a walk in the park, and that's because Ireland's history, well, it's complicated, and that turbulent past had a huge, direct impact on the records that were kept, and more importantly, the ones that survived.
So let's look at 3 major historical events that really shaped the records. First, the Great Famine in the 1840s. It caused mass death and emigration, which, as you can imagine, just blew up family lines. Then in 1921, the island was partitioned, which split the country's record-keeping between Dublin and Belfast. But the biggest blow, the one that genealogists still talk about today, was a massive fire in 1922 during the Irish Civil War. It happened at the Public Record Office in Dublin.
And this quote from an archivist at the time, it just says it all. One blow, the records of centuries have passed into oblivion. You could just feel the devastation. Think about it, centuries of documents, including almost all of the 19th century census records, gone. Just poof. It was a complete catastrophe for family history. But, and this is a huge but, the story does not end there. It's not all doom and gloom. Because, thankfully, a ton of absolutely vital records survived. Why? They just happened to be stored somewhere else. So really, the story of Irish genealogy isn't about what was lost. It's about how to find what's left.
Okay, so let's focus on what we do have. When it comes to the records that survived, there are what I call the big 3. These are the absolute core of your research, your main genealogical tools. First up is civil registration. Now, this is a big one. You need to remember the year 1864. That's when the Irish government started officially recording all births, marriages, and deaths for everyone. Now, you can see non-Catholic marriages started a bit earlier in 1845, but 1864 is the magic number. These are your gold standard official records, and the great news is they all survived.
So that begs the question, right? What if you're looking for someone before 1864? Well, that's when you turn to our second tool, church records. These are your main source for baptisms and marriages before the government got involved. And remember how we said some records weren't in that building that burned down? This is them. They were kept locally in individual churches, which is exactly why so many of them, some going all the way back to the 1700s, are still around today.
And number 3 of our big 3 is the census. Now, we already talked about the bad news, that most of the 19th century censuses were lost in that fire. But the great news is that the 1901 and 1911 censuses survived completely intact, and they are an absolute treasure trove. They give you a snapshot of every single person living in a household on a specific night. I mean, it's just incredible information.
Okay, so now you know what you're looking for. The next logical step is, where do you look? Think of this next part as your treasure map to the archives, both online and in the real world.
Let's start with what is, without a doubt, the single most important website for Irish genealogy. I love this quote from a user on Reddit who said, "Honestly, this might be the most useful site for Irish genealogy that exists." They're talking about irishgenealogy.ie. It's run by the government, it's completely free, and it's your #1 stop for all those civil registration records we talked about.
Now, that's not the only free resource. You'll also want to bookmark the National Archives of Ireland website. That's where you'll find the 1901 and 1911 census online. And the National Library of Ireland has digitized Catholic parish registers. Then, of course, you've got the big subscription sites like Roots Ireland, Find My Past, and Ancestry. They can be incredibly helpful because they have tons of transcribed records that can sometimes speed things up.
And one last thing, don't forget that not everything is online. I know, shocking, right? For the really deep dives, for the stuff that hasn't been digitized yet, you might actually have to go to Ireland. A visit to the National Archives in Dublin with the Public Record Office of Northern Ireland in Belfast, that's PRONI for short, can be absolutely essential. That's where the real hidden gems are.
So, there you have it, the fundamentals. You've got the 4 keys you need to start, you understand the historical challenges, you know about the big 3 record types, and you've got a map of where to find them. You're officially ready to begin. All those centuries of records are just sitting there, waiting. They hold the clues to your family's story. So, what story are you going to uncover?